Well, Eaton Steel Corporation was founded in 1953 by my father, Al Goodman, and by my uncle, Ozzie Goodman. It was started out as a brokerage company where my father set up a table of chairs. Actually, the chairs wasn't really a chair, it was an orange crate in a small part of the warehouse that they had across from their sporting goods operation on Michigan Avenue in Detroit. My father was a metallurgist during World War II. So when the war was over, he said, you know, he says, I really understand metals, I understand the chemistries of them. So what part of the steel industry really focuses around grades? And that is the steel bar industry, because it's so grade specific. So he decided that he was going to venture out and they would keep the sporting goods business going. He would venture out into this new venture, 50-50 partners with my uncle. When he became more successful, he found that he had more customers than he had excess steel. So he started buying steel and putting it in a warehouse. Then he started getting calls for a product called cold drawn bars. So my Uncle Oz and my father, along with two other partners, created Hercules in 1957.
Hercules was founded in 1957 with about an $8,000 investment. Bought a draw bench in an auction, then hired the guy that was running the draw bench. And he says, all right, did you buy the shot blaster? And my dad said, what's a shot blaster? He said, well, you need to clean the steel before you draw it. So he called up the machinery dealer who bought the shot blaster and bought it off him with a little profit. He said, all right, did you buy the straightener? My dad said, what's the straightener? Well, you need a straightener because after you draw the steel, you have to be straight. Called up the machinery dealer who bought the straightener, gave him a little profit, bought the straightener, and Hercules is up and running in business. Hercules Drawn Steel, I believe, was the first cold finishing mill in the United States to have a Schumag combined drawing machine. It was 1961, and up to that time, everybody was using Lewis lines and Vaughan lines, and nobody had combined lines. You drew a coil, you took the coil, you put it on a straightener and a cut line, and it would cut the material. The Schumag did it all in line, all at one time. It was quite a risk for my dad, and the line was set up and running, and it was a really innovation for the cold finishing business. And we've been trying to innovate on a continuous basis ever since then. I remember I think it was the late 60s, early 70s, we put our first inline mag tester on one of the Schumags. Customers, we would draw 40,000 pounds of steel, and it may have been one or two bad bars, had some cracks in it. And we'd send the 40,000 pounds to the customer, they'd find a bad steel, they'd send it all back, and we had to go one bar at a time and test it. So inline testing at that time was really unheard of, and my dad and Schumag company in Germany got together and developed an inline tester, and we put it on our first line, and boy, it was tremendous. We would draw the steel, kick out 3 or 4 bad bars, and the customers weren't returning steel like a revolving door. And eventually, over the next 4 or 5 years, we put these testing machines on all of our lines. And today, every line has inline testing.
It was a fascinating thing to watch my father and my uncle, and by proxy my grandfather, go off to work every day. They had a camaraderie that was really phenomenal. And myself, as a young boy, I used to wait when the family would get together for the 3 guys to come home from work, and I used to watch them get out of the car, and they would be exhausted because they worked 10, 12 hours a day. And they would come in laughing and backslapping, and I sat there as a kid and I fantasized being the 4th Musketeer. It was always like that. So when I had the opportunity after school, I jumped at coming into the family business. To me, it was exciting, it was dynamic, and of course I got to work with my dad and my uncle, and my grandfather was always around. It was always a terrific time in my life to be involved with my family. I remember going into Hercules when Hercules was in Detroit. And you have to understand that when these companies started, there was very little money. They were all used equipment. It was dark and dingy, as a lot of factories were back in the 50s and early 60s. So I remember on a cold winter day, my father taking me down to Hercules, which was pretty run down at the time because there was just not a lot of money. It was lit by a string of exposed light bulbs down the middle of the plant. It had a dust cloud kind of running all over the place. You know, you were lucky if you were about 5 foot because your head wasn't in the dust. And walking into our plant manager's office and finding there was a hole in the in the roof and the desk covered with snow. And yet my father was proud because it was his company. It was something that he started from nothing, along with his brother, Ozzy. So, you know, I looked at it through the eyes of a kid. My father looked at it through the eyes of an entrepreneur, which is what he was.
My dad's office used to be in the Michigan Theater building downtown Detroit, and I remember my mom and myself and my brother coming down. Maybe it was on a Thursday night or a Friday night. We'd pick up my dad at about 4 o'clock. We'd go out to dinner, and I remember coming into the offices, and my big enjoyment was this big thermofax machine, or this big adding machine, pushing the buttons and letting it go. I was about 7 years old or 8 years old or something like that, and watching the machine. You know, I was proud of my dad. He started with nothing and worked hard and made sure that the family and the employees and the business grew.
My grandfather was a very special person to me. I guess if I had a word, it would be righteous. He deserved my last name. He was probably the one that really deserved to be called a Goodman the most. He taught me lots of things. I remember being here on a Saturday with him, and we used to have not really an alarm system, but there was heavier doors and gates and things. And I remember he was locking up, and you had to walk into the front lobby and lock one door and then do the next one. There was something to it, a whole procedure. We end up outside, and there's a paper clip on the ground. You know, so my grandfather picks up the paper clip, goes through the hassle of undoing all the locks and all the stuff, and goes inside and places it on one of his receptionist's desks. He's like, "Look, see, I just saved ourselves half a penny." I mean, you know, those stories are like someone would make up the stories, but I lived with someone who, you know, he did things to teach you things. And so I think about him all the time when I'm here. When I think about my father and my experiences with my father at work, and my uncle as well, I can't describe how big the shoes are. Those boys worked very hard for their entire lives. I remember coming into work on Saturdays. Their 2 offices are now where our kitchen is. And there was 4 offices. There was my grandfather, his brother, my dad, and his brother. They spent all day on the phone. They did everything. And they did all the logistics. They did all of the invoicing. They did all of the purchasing, the selling, everything. And it was all handwritten. This was before the computers. So they had card systems. And I remember they had stacks and stacks of these note cards with all of our customers' information on them. And they would cold call, and they just worked harder than anybody. They really did.
All of our robots in our malting and sawing and shearing departments are one named after my brother Mark, one named after my dad Albert, whose nickname was Abby, and one named after my uncle Aaron, whose nickname was Ozzy. And we thought that was kind of funny because we'd go out, my brother and I, still today, we would go out and look at the robots. I said, "Yeah, look at Mark, he's not running today," because, you know, that robot's playing golf. And of course, I'm always working, Gary, because I'm cutting the small sizes. Our business started in the Detroit area and still is in the Detroit area because there's lots of manufacturing still in Michigan. We've had opportunities and we've been courted by other states to move better tax breaks. A lot of our industry has left Detroit, but I remember in the 80s people saying the last person in Detroit or last person in Michigan, please turn out the lights. And Michigan came back, and Michigan's going to come back again. People have a tremendous work ethic. There's well-trained people here, and there's lots of intelligence here that can't be found in other states. We would leave Michigan for anything.
I think it's important to be here in Detroit because Detroit is the Motor City. If you're going to have as one of your market segments the automobile industry, then Detroit would be one of the places that you would say, hey, it's important to be here in Detroit. I look back at Detroit from my vantage point, and I remember when Detroit was the center of the universe when it came to manufacturing. Detroit has so much to offer in terms of talented labor. It has history. It has the ability to create factories here in Detroit. It's the center of the universe as far as I'm concerned.
When I think about being a business owner in Detroit, particular for our business because it's multi-generational, and Detroit's one of those cities that is always changing. I like the fact that we're still in the city. Our main headquarters in Oak Park is still the city that my grandfather started the company in. We have a successful family story, and it makes you feel good because there's handfuls of them that stay in Detroit. So, you know, you kind of feel like, okay, yeah, we're one of the ones we're holding strong and trying to create jobs and trying to do the right things, and so that makes you feel good.
One of the exciting things about being here, I've been here over 40 years, is to see somebody work their whole life here and retire here. I probably hate to see everybody go, but I enjoy that they're able to go and retire and still be alive and healthy. It's a sense of accomplishment when someone comes to work and works here their whole life. I think on the average in the United States, people spend about 7 years at a job. When someone comes on board here, the first thing I say to them is that I'm hoping this is your last job, because with everybody we hire thinking that they're going to retire here, and that's a feeling of accomplishment.
We have a saying here that you either retire or you die here. It's a morbid yet phenomenal saying because we don't have a lot of churn and people don't run away from us. It's nice to know that you have a nice company. People like to work with you, and our employees are fantastic. We enjoy working with all of them. When I think of our employees, there are many people that are currently employed or that I have worked with that have already retired and or passed away that worked here longer than I've been breathing air. I'm 35 years old. There's many 40-year employees. To know that they've been coming to work here every single day of my life, it makes you feel good.
People are our most important asset. No matter what position we have in our company, we have filled those positions with the top people that we could find. We also have people that have been with the company for over 40 years. We have very little turnover in our company. So we have people who truly love the company, want to work for the company, and want to treat the company like it's their own. It's always interesting. I treat the company like it's mine because it is mine. But employees treat the company like it's theirs, and yet it's not. It takes a really unique commitment by people who love this place to give it the kind of energy that we have going on here. That's why I continually talk about the value of the people that work here. They put their life's blood into this company. They treat it like it's their own. Our people are the thing that really sets us apart.